Shiromi Katakana was born in Takasaki, in the mountainous Gunma Prefecture. The identity of the city of almost 400,000 souls, just over 100 kilometers from Tokyo, rests strongly on the Daruma doll. The doll is a symbol of luck that always returns to its upright stance, no matter how far it falls. His mother placed a small red doll beside his crib on the day he was born. It would follow him everywhere, through triumphs and disasters alike. When he was 9 years old, his family moved to Honolulu to open a supermarket on Dillingham Boulevard. The boy's classmates struggled with his name, so Shiromi Katakana became Keri Shiromi, a name as easy as the tropical breeze that lifted the red-orange flowers of the Royal Poinciana trees. By the time Keri turned 41, life seemed effortless. But, as he would later admit, in the hardest moments, the Daruma doll was steadier than he was. Armed with a master's degree in financial engineering from UC Berkeley, Keri was offered opportunities at major multinational firms in New York, London, and Zurich. Instead, to his parents' surprise, he chose a demanding role in a Tokyo-based hedge fund. This choice was not simply about returning to his roots. Keri was fascinated by the systems that governed global money, and Tokyo, with its speed, precision, and high standards, was the perfect place to learn. He settled in the Nihonbashi district. His Gunmaben accent marked him instantly as a son of the provinces, but his sharp mind and quiet charm opened doors and hearts. Even so, the rigid hierarchies, relentless pursuit of consensus, and the indirect language eventually grated against his American-honed independence. He joked to his American-educated friends, too much choreography, not enough jazz, but it was there, between late-night meetings, that he learned of the carry trade, borrowing cheap yen to buy higher-yielding U.S. treasuries. A simple idea, elegant, and, in his eyes, a bridge between the two worlds he straddled. So, when he announced that he was returning to America to start his own business, his colleagues were aghast. Seniority would be lost. Loyalty would be questioned. Even his closest mentor whispered, "It is dangerous to be thought of as unpredictable." Keri smiled and said, "The Daruma always gets back up." He landed in Honolulu as the Frangipani burst into spring bloom, and for the first time in years, he felt the warmth of belonging. His parents were bewildered but delighted to have him close by, especially after he patiently explained, in simple terms, about his plan involving the carry trade. Over a bowl of miso soup, he said, "Japanese loans cost almost nothing. U.S. treasuries pay on average 3.5%. I borrow yen, convert it to dollars, buy 2-year treasuries, and collect the difference." His father looked perplexed. "Is this legal?" Keri smiled as he explained that, at a minimum, the yen carry trade was worth over 3 trillion US dollars. His father listened as if Keri were explaining the DNA of a new species of fish. His mother, less concerned about numbers and more about her son's happiness, nodded with quiet pride. His father finally said, "If things fail, you can stock shelves with me. The supermarket always needs good people." Keri laughed. "I'll keep it in mind." Of course, he would never countenance taking such a job. For 3 years, everything Keri touched turned golden. His banking friends in Tokyo arranged the loans, and clients flocked to him to share in his promise of guaranteed, predictable returns backed by the U.S. government. Every 6 months, the coupon payments rolled in, like the gentle waves at Kaimana Beach. Keri bought a second Daruma doll for his desk. One eye was painted for the goal he had set. The other he left blank, waiting for completion. Then the policy board of the Bank of Japan tipped the world upside down. In an attempt to strengthen domestic demand, the board members declared that interest rates would rise. The yen strengthened. Overnight, the carry trade that had fed global capital markets for decades flipped from a blessing to a curse. One morning, Keri watched in horror as his computer models updated. He needed to sell his U.S. treasuries and fast. That was if there was anyone willing to buy. Japanese loan costs now soared. U.S. treasury prices plummeted, and global liquidity was evaporating like a mist in a desert heatwave. Keri was not alone. The positions held by the biggest financial institutions began to unwind. The major players in New York and London found themselves trapped in a catastrophic chain reaction. If they did not cover their Japanese loans, they would lose everything. Of course, some gambled that the complex, reverse carry trade would save them, but Keri chose a more direct strategy. Keri's first instinct was loyalty. He took the 9-hour flight to Narita Airport and headed directly to Nihonbashi. He met with his banking friends, asking for help. Could they make an exception by offering him a lower borrowing rate over the next couple of months? Could they hold off on foreclosing on his defaulted loans? His loyal friends could not be moved. Protocols had been issued. Everyone had to obey. Risk officers were in command. They said, "We cannot make exceptions," even though sympathy flickered in their eyes. In the weeks that followed, after Carey had returned to Hawaii, the real devastation began. Dollars rushed out of global markets and stampeded back to Japan. The result was biblical. Manhattan's financial heartland looked as if the tide had receded and had forgotten to return. All the major stocks on Wall Street crashed, some as much as 37%. Unemployment in the U.S. skyrocketed from 4.8% to over 15%. South American economies dissolved one after another. The weakest fell first, followed by their neighbors, until the strongest were overthrown. Europe's banking system splintered. Russia defaulted on its loans. China locked its financial borders. India's rupee dropped to 1,000th of its previous value. The Middle East wrapped itself in a cloak of austerity. The financial world was not shaking. It had already collapsed. Unsurprisingly, Carey's clients panicked. He, who had once been the calmest man in the room, found himself pleading, urging them to hold, insisting that U.S. Treasuries would recover, that the yen would weaken again, and that he could cover the loans. But they didn't believe him, and soon, neither did he. 2 weeks before his bankruptcy became inevitable, the value of the yen did sag a little. The American president declared that U.S. Treasuries would forever be safe and that his administration would back the banks. That gave Carey a tiny chance at redemption. He sold the remaining treasuries and paid off his loans. His banking friends in Nihonbashi were secretly relieved. For the first time, Carey felt as though his life had shattered into a million pieces. Nights brought nightmares. He was a hostage, a prisoner, a refugee. His Daruma, on the windowsill, stared ahead with its single painted eye, the unfulfilled promise mocking him. His parents became worried. It was his hollow cheeks, his haggard eyes, the morose silence that replaced his talkative, easy confidence. Then one afternoon, Carey's doorbell rang. His father stood outside, wearing his best Aloha shirt, the one printed with sprays of tiny white orchids. He held a small canister, which he had brought from the supermarket. The two men sat in the kitchen, each sipping tentatively at a cup of sencha green tea. The Pacific breeze gently lifted the gauze curtains beside the open window. Carey's father cleared his throat, like a man who had rehearsed his lines and was now ready to speak. He said, "There is a position, open at the supermarket if you want it." His tone suggested a question rather than a statement. Carey looked at him, stunned. His father was not offering pity, but a chance to move on, with dignity. For a moment, Carey said nothing. Then he noticed the Daruma doll on the windowsill, still standing upright, still waiting for its unfinished eye. He broke. Years of discipline dissolved into tears he could not stop. He was exhausted. He was ashamed. Yet he also felt the relief of a man who had nothing more to prove. His father gently placed his hand on Carey's shoulder. He said, "The Daruma always rises." Carey realized it was now his turn to stand.